Officially, good morning, everyone. By a show of hands, how many were here last night for the dinner? Okay, excellent. Then you folks will have no excuse when it comes to the review time of the myths and the takeaways we talked about last night. I expect you guys to fill those in for me right on cue so that we can bring the other folks into the loop that maybe were not here last night. But as promised, I mentioned that last night was about the unpacking of some of these management myths, and then this morning we would fill in some of those gaps with some real takeaways and some application points that you guys can use to go forward. Steve, that was a great message. I think it shows the preparation of the board, of all of you guys for these messages, I think really to tie together very well, because this message for the next hour we're going to talk about, very similar to last night, those management relationships and those management challenges. And what a great message, I think, to start us this morning in terms of your own self and your own alignment being right so that you can be prepared to be an influence on those around you. So that really meant a lot to me. I appreciate that message. Okay, it's time to stand up. Everybody up. All right, here's what you're going to do. Now I'm going to come up here while you guys are standing so I can see you and you can see me. We tried something last night with the handheld microphone. Feedback from you guys that did not go over well. You guys were not overly excited about the microphone. I'm not going to force that this morning. But here's what we are going to do. Within your grouping, so we have group 1 over here, we have group 2 in these tables here, group 3, and then group 4. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to spend 5 minutes finding someone that is sitting at least 3 rows away from you, and you are going to discuss with each other 2 things. It's really one question, but it's 2 points. I want you to share with your study buddy or with your neighbor specifically the challenges you deal with when it comes to management, managing your staff, or the relationships, the strategic partnerships we've talked about. So if you may work for a company where the organization of your company and your employees is very well defined in terms of this person reports to this person and the reporting lines are very well laid out, or it may be that you're responsible for a large group of people and it sort of all falls under a leadership team, so to speak. It doesn't really matter. What I want to know is, what are your specific individual challenges when it comes to managing people? And you're going to think of 2 of those, and you're going to share those with your partner. Your partner, in turn, will share his or her 2 challenges back with you. You have 5 minutes. Find someone that's sitting at least 3 rows away from you. Go. Okay, folks, here we go. Here we go. Time is up. Excellent job, everyone. Excellent job. I was determined to find a way to get some feedback from you guys. So I had to take the microphone away and get you to interact with each other, which is always good. Hopefully that was a good little break and an opportunity to stretch your legs. But now you have the obligation of sharing with me about what you talked about. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to put these things on the board so that as we go through the content from today, over the next hour or so, we can hopefully match that with some of the challenges you guys face. I need a volunteer. Would somebody raise their hand and say, my partner told me their challenges are ABC? Thank you.
We have two of them in our group. There's four of us.
Okay.
Two of them said challenge with communication.
Okay. Anyone who else, probably that happened quite often in several of your groups. I want to know more about what that means. Dig a little deeper. Somebody that also, tell me more about that, or what did you guys talk about specifically?
Creating shared expectations.
Ooh, huge. I know some of you guys can't see this board. That's okay. It's really more just of documenting what it is we want to point to as we go through the ideas. Other specifics related to the topic of communication.
Well, in the management aspect of it, I think that the people, as we've all got people underneath us, I think we need to know what everybody is doing.
Gotcha.
Where you're going. I mean, even just today, things like that.
Excellent. So, would it be fair to say a lot of great people working very hard, but in some cases working in different directions? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, other challenges. Other challenges that you or your partner share. Yes?
My partner mentioned that they have a family business and that it's at times hard to lead your brothers and sisters, especially if they're older.
That's outstanding. I'm looking. I didn't mean that was like a widespread problem. You guys can figure. I don't know if it is or not, but I do think there'll be some content today that matches that. That's a really good one. Other challenges. What else did you guys talk about?
My partner struggled with communicating with peers, like their friends as well as coworkers, and that dividing line of how that affects them communicating with each other.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's get one or two more. Come on, good stuff. You guys did a great job. You really shared with each other. It's just us. We're a tight group here. Come on, share with me. Okay, one more. Somebody give us one more. Delegation. Delegation. Excellent. You know, we talked last night about the difference between empowerment and abandonment. Delegation is kind of in that same conversation, and that is difficult because there are so many competing things happening and things coming at us and distractions during the day. That's a really good one. Okay, so on the board, I've got just basically a reminder of what happened last night and kind of where we're going with this. We learned about paradigms. We talked about what paradigms were not 20 cents, but the way of seeing things. And we talked about 4 management myths, and sometimes those paradigms that we have about relating with others can lead us to believe or to buy into certain myths that are just not always true. And we followed that up with really the brutal facts. Remember that for each myth we had a box that came in really with some brutal facts. Okay? And we concluded with this concept called breakaway, which challenged us to say, you know what, let's not just be problem finders and stop in the outcome box. let's not even just limit ourselves to making different decisions, but let's go all the way back and really think about what we believe about a certain topic. That's what breakaway is, okay? I love the topic, the navigate theme. I really love that, and I believe if I read the flyer correctly for this session, it's entitled Setting the Foundation. So setting the foundation and navigate is a really, really great theme for what we're going to dive into at this point. And the reason is this. When I think about navigating, and when I think about being on the water, you think about these marker points or these buoys or maybe GPS points that are sort of our checkpoints along the way, directing us towards where that goal is. Well, you're going to walk away today with, at a minimum, I hope, 4 of those marker points, 4 of those buoys to really think about that I believe will cut into these topics. And of course, we could go on and on and on and list out many, many more of these. But that's how we're going to navigate through this topic of management and managing others, okay? So without any other delay, let's dive into this. Here is challenge number 1. Now, I mentioned last night, the handouts that go along with this are just more of a visual aid. As I read and as I study and as I think of things, even kind of last minute that may come to mind, you may find a few little things that are not in your handouts that we go through today. Don't be a problem finder and say, hey Todd, it's not in the note. Just roll with me, okay? Just roll with me. That's what Leland referred to, I mentioned last night, as the gotta gets. Some things you just gotta get, okay, as we go through this. And here is number 1. Remember, really 4 topics for today, 4 challenges, 4 things for you to consider taking with you and applying in the real world. Please take notes. If there is a question that comes to mind about, Todd, I just don't see how this translates. I'm not sure how I can take it. I get you. I hear you. But I need some practical advice on taking that out of here. Stop me, write it down, and let's dive into that, okay? And this is number 1. Understand your role as a manager. One of the myths last night is that leadership doesn't equal management. It's a characteristic, but it doesn't equal management, okay? I got a couple of things that will help us unpack this particular challenge, okay? And the first is going to be a very brief video clip. I mentioned this book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham last night. If you did not have a chance to come by and write down these book titles, please do that. And this is about a 3-minute video clip. He mentions like 58 minutes. That's the whole clip. I'm not showing the whole clip. He is going to give us just a taste of this idea of what it means to embrace your role as manager. And then there's a little point from the book I'm going to draw out when the video is over. So sit back and enjoy this just for a couple of moments.
I wanted to talk today about the role of managing as compared to the role of leading. And I'd like, I guess, to speak for about 20 minutes on the first and about 35 to 37.5 minutes on the second, and then stop. And then I believe we have microphones here and here. And I would love it if, I'm not sure how you're going to shimmy or shuffle out of your rows, but I'd love to take any questions that you may have that will get us to the top of the hour. Is that okay? So if you're saving up questions, I'll be perfect. We'll be able to take them in the last 10 minutes before the end. The role of manager and leader, you may have different words for those 2 roles, but normally when we think of manager, we think of something that is subservient to leader. You think you're a manager and therefore you're just really a mini leader in waiting. I'd like to draw a different distinction between those 2 roles. Whatever you may end up calling those roles in your leadership development program or in your vernacular, I'd like to draw a really keen distinction between what a manager actually does and what a leader actually does. And I guess I'm going to make the case that these 2 things are not one in subservience to the other, but actually the opposite of one another. The role and the skills needed to excel as a manager are very, very different, albeit equally important to the roles that you need to excel as a leader. Some of you in this room may have the talent to do both excellently, but in all my experience of interviewing leaders and managers, I find very, very few people that aren't predisposed predisposed at least partially more toward one role than another. This has nothing to do with level in the organization. You could be the chief executive of the entire organization and be a great manager. This isn't about level. It's about responsibility and function. So I'm going to start with managing and then move on to leading and take your questions. Here's managing. So you can see that all the way back here. Apparently if I click on this, I advance my own slide. There we go. Look at that, Alex. That works. Genius. Normally I'm allergic to technology. I get close to it and the whole thing just blows up. This is excellent stuff. The role responsibility of manager is this. At least in terms of the way that I'm conceiving this from all the research that I've been a part of, the chief responsibility of a manager is to turn one person's talent into performance.
Now, one note, I'm going to pause it just for a second. He uses the word talent in place of personality. I think that's more accurate. It's actually more consistent with what's in his book. I don't know if that was a typo on his slide, but I would encourage you to replace the word personality with talent. So I'm going to pause that if you can still see that on the screen, if you want to add that to your notes. This is his definition of management. Okay? This is his definition of management. To turn one person's talent into performance. One of our slides last night, we talked about that management is a participative sport where you are actively involved in affecting the performance of other people. And so I think that's very well put. Your responsibility as a manager is to do this, to turn someone else's talent into performance.
If you're a manager, you have a small group of people that report directly to you. And again, whether you are the chief of the entire organization or whether you are a frontline supervisor with your first squad, your first team, the role of the manager is looking at those individuals who happen to be on your team and figuring out some way to get the most out of those individuals. Graphically, for those of you that like graphs and pictures over words, think more about it, look at it, hopefully you can see that okay. You want performance. As a manager, you've got a whole bunch of people that report to you. You want them to be productive. And those people have strengths and those people have weaknesses. When you are challenged, simply put, as a manager, is how on earth do I take my understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the people that report to me and somehow turn it into performance? If you ever, and I hope you do, if you ever work for a really great manager, whatever you want, whatever that person's title is, whatever that person's level is in the hierarchy, when you work for a great boss, that person will somehow figure out how to take the strengths that you possess, take the weaknesses that you possess, somehow combine all of his understanding or her understanding of that and turn it into productivity. How do they do that? What is the one thing that every great manager seems to know that other less effective managers seem to have forgotten? Well, it's pretty straightforward. When you look at strengths versus weaknesses, the best managers seem to understand that the key thing that you got to be able to do really, really well is this. You got to find what's unique about that person. They may all have the same title, they may all have the same job function, but a manager knows that I don't have a bunch of generic individuals reporting to me, I have a bunch of unique individuals reporting to me, and I've got to figure out how to take the strengths of each one and maximize them, and take the weaknesses of each one and minimize them in some way.
Okay, let's talk about that. We're talking about embracing your role as a manager. If we really buy into and if we really believe that management is a participative sport and your role and your responsibility is to turn a person's talent into performance, that's some heavy-duty responsibility, because it starts with selecting the right people in the first place, getting those right people into the right job, and then developing those people throughout. And I mentioned last night my background in the insurance industry, right? The most common way we promoted folks into the claims management role were people that were great claims adjusters that had nothing to do with each other. Those two jobs have nothing to do with each other. But yet that's the way of the world in corporate America oftentimes. So what do we do about that? Well, there's a couple of things. Leland mentioned last night the concept of DISC, and I've spoken with several of you guys that use other indicators in terms of matching people's talents with specific jobs, okay? I talked with also several of you that understand that idea and the importance of integrating that into your business. We can talk about it all day long, we talk about assessments, but I really hope and believe you guys are looking at the role of or the talents of a person and the needs of a job. Okay, those two concepts really have to be matched. Now, when they do, this was the other thing I wanted to point out in this book. If you want to write this down, you can. This is probably too much to write down. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. There are 12 questions. Listen to this. This comes from Marcus Buckingham as well. Listen to this. These 12 questions don't capture everything you may want to know about your workplace, but they do capture the most information and the most important information about the health and the culture of your organization, okay? Listen to these 12 questions. If there's one, like I mentioned last night, that really jumps out at you, write that one down. If you'd like to see this book afterwards, please do, or get your own copy. These are 12 questions I hope as a business leader you are really considering. Listen to this. These are the questions your people are asking themselves. Do I know what is expected of me at work? This was one of the first items you guys mentioned to me when we took feedback just a moment ago. Your people are asking that every day. When they walk through the door, it is critical that they know what's expected of them, okay? And you can say all day long, well, they should know because this, or we told them this, or they missed this, or whatever. Your people are asking this every single day. Number 2, do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? That's what your people are asking. At work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? In the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for doing good work? Think about that. When's the last time you went to somebody eyeball to eyeball with a handshake and said, hey, Joe, I appreciate that you did this. It connects a name to an action with a feeling. That's appreciation. Does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? Is there someone at work who encourages my development? At work, do my opinions seem to count? Does the mission or the purpose of my company make me feel that my job is important? Are my coworkers committed to doing quality work? Do I have a best friend at work? Now, I've questioned that. You know, if I could ask, Marcus, are you telling me I may not be happy in my job if I don't have a best friend at work? Well, there's meaning behind that, meaning that when we go to work, think about the number of hours and days we spend, we need to have someone we can confide in or at least lean on a little bit. I shared with you last night how important my grandfather has been in my life. Well, I was at work when I found out that he had passed. Thankfully, I had a buddy in the next office, and I could go into that office and close the door and basically just lose it. So that's what the meaning behind best friend at work is, that the culture allows us to have that trust in someone else. It encourages that. Number 11, in the last 6 months, has someone at work talked to me about my progress? And then number 12, this last year, have I had opportunities at work to learn and grow? Now here's where I'm going to point back to. I'm going to point back to the very first myth we talked about last night, which was, I don't have time for fill in the blank. I don't have time for training. I don't have time, I'm doing my own thing. I don't have time for meetings. I don't have time. And I saw a lot of eyeballs looking around last night when I mentioned that. I mentioned I was the elephant in the room guy, right? I think there were some elephants in the room when I was talking about that. And we feel the pressure of that and the burden of that in running a business. But here's what we know. We know that our people are asking those questions. And we know that their answers to those questions impact their productivity. We know that. And if they are answering those questions in a dissatisfactory way, they will not be performing or contributing to the organization and ultimately will look to go somewhere else. We know that, okay? I'm going to get back to those questions here in just a moment. I'm going to move on to something else before we wrap up this challenge number 1. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Here's the next thing I want to present. Remember, challenge number 1 was embracing your role. Okay, here's a research project I want to share with you to help us further embrace our role. Here's what I want you to do with me. You notice there's 9 potential boxes. Okay, this comes from Dr. Kirkpatrick back in the early 90s that I actually studied as part of learning to be a teacher in the College of Education. Here's what he says. Look down the left-hand side. You see 3 different people. You see a student, you see an instructor, and then you see a manager. So let's think about this in the business sense, right? You're the manager, right? And you have an employee that you either send off to training, or you have an employee maybe that, there's a lot of on-the-job type learning and a lot of things people can do on the job to learn. So that would be like a learning event. Okay, so you're the manager, and you've got an employee either going through some type of a learning event like that, or possibly even a class. And then there's going to be the instructor, or the person in charge of sort of leading that learning event. Okay, 3 people involved. There's also 3 time frames in which this research project looked at: before the event, during the event, and after the event. So I've got a question for you. I want you to do this just on your own, out to the side or on a scratch note piece of paper. I want you to do this. I want you to ask this question to yourself. There are 9 possible combinations. In other words, the student is going to be before the event, during the event, and after the event. But the instructor also plays a role before the event, during the event, and after the event. And then the manager does as well. I want to know, which of those combinations do you believe has the greatest impact on the behavior change of the student? There are 9 possibilities. I want you to label the ones you think are the 3 most impactful. So here's what you're going to do. In the box that you think is the most powerful, the most impactful in terms of the student's behavior, or in this case, the employee's behavior, you're going to label that box number 1. That is the most impactful combination. And then I want you to do number 2 and number 3, the 3 most powerful. Did I make any sense out of that, or is that kind of confusing? Got it? Thank you. Really confusing. 3 combinations, right? Let's say you're going to send an employee off to a training class. There are 9 possibilities of that person's behavior either likely to change or not likely to change. Okay? Start with just number 1. Which of those combinations would you think has the biggest impact? What I hope is that maybe the theme of this seminar and the theme of my talk last night and this morning is a little bit of a foreshadowing. I'll go ahead and tell you what number 1 is. The manager's role after the training event has the single greatest impact on the behavior of that employee. Number 2 is what the student does with that information afterwards. You can sit in a training class all day long and that means nothing. I was in charge of a training department at the insurance company where I worked, and we would give credit to employees that finished training classes. But guess how you finished a training class? You took the lesson from the class and you put it to work on your job. You may not get credit for class until a month later. Attending the class means nothing. The student's role afterwards using the material is critical. Guess what number 3 is? The manager's role before the class. So think about what we're talking about. We're talking about, in this case, a student, but we're translating that to an employee, your employee, or a coworker. And we're talking about their performance, their behavior change, their development. 2 of the 3 most important factors in their development is you. before they go to that class or before they go to that learning event, like I say, it can include seminars or on-the-job learning, before they go and afterwards. And I'll give you the greatest example I can think of. And I'm guilty of this. I do this well sometimes, and I do this very poorly sometimes. Every Sunday, when we get in the car, leaving church, I have an opportunity as a parent to ask my daughters, "What'd you learn this morning?" Some Sunday mornings I think about asking that question. Some Sunday mornings I don't. I can promise you the Sunday mornings that I do, when they have to answer that question, are the Sunday mornings when what they learned carries with them into their life. Because their dad asked the question. Let me tell you how to make it even more impactful. It's the Sunday mornings when I tell them that I'm going to ask them that question before they go to class. Because guess what they're thinking during class? I got to be ready. Dad's got a question for me when I. Okay. Now, there's a lot to be said for the instructor, and there's a lot to be said for my children being attentive and learning and listening. But when mom or dad says, "I'm going to ask you after class what you learned," and then when I ask them that after class, that is by far the most powerful learning moments for them. The same is true in business. Here's a gotta get for you. Ooh, this one's going to sting a little bit. Get ready. Please don't run me out of here when I say this, okay? There's a reason we don't do that as managers. And it's because our managers didn't do it for us. It's not a way of life. We don't do this. This doesn't happen. Certainly doesn't happen in corporate America. Embrace your role as manager. That's challenge number one, and this is a specific way to do that. Okay? I mentioned a couple of takeaways I'm going to give you, and I'm going to go back to the survey. Okay, Todd, you're saying embrace my role as manager. Fine. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you what it means. The 12 questions we just read, make a survey. Give it to your people. Write down these 12 questions, page 28 out of this book, and have everybody in your company answer those questions. You know why we have such a diversion to surveys? I'm not sure a lot of us really honestly want to know what the answers are. I'm going to steal a line from later in the presentation, but that'll help save a little time. If any of you have ever read any of Ken Blanchard's books, 1 Minute Manager, this happens to be one of the books I have up there. Ken Blanchard does a lot of writings and videos and things on the topic of management. He says, if you want to know what kind of manager you are, ask the people that report to you. You want to know what kind of husband you are? Ask your wife. It goes the other way too, ladies. You know, kind of wife, ask her, okay? Ask. They'll tell you what they're thinking. Give the survey. How about the next one? Have pre and post meetings. Don't just look at these numbers and go, okay, that's great. Ask yourself a question. The next time that a staff member goes to a training class or goes to a learning event, are you going to have a pre-meeting with them? Will you take the time to set their goals? You don't have to, and a lot of you won't do it. The research says that the greatest behavior change happens when you do. So the question is, are you going to get the most money and the most bang out of the most behavior change out of the money and the time that's required to send somebody to training? If you want the biggest impact to happen, have a pre and a post meeting with them, just like the research says. And then the other thing is to evaluate yourself on management things. That's not a very technical term, but here's what it means. I meet with companies all the time about the topic of performance management, where employees, maybe they have a list of objectives or a scorecard or things where they're really evaluating their performance for the year. You know how many managers I meet with that have objectives for being a manager? Almost never. Now, managers need to make the widget or make the sale or whatever they do. That's very important. But if management is important and influencing people is important, like we've talked about so far, score yourself on it. When you start to do that, you'll make that a goal and you'll actually make a priority out of it. Okay, so that's number one, embracing your role as a manager. 3 specific takeaways. Let's go to challenge number 2. Never underestimate the impact you have on the people around you. I think we get caught up in life sometimes, we get caught up in the speed of the job, and we forget how impactful, sometimes how meaningful, and sometimes how hurtful actions and words can be. So my challenge to you is do not underestimate the impact you have on others. There's a couple of examples or a couple stories I'll share with you to make this point, and then we'll do some takeaways. The Dale K story is a story back from my insurance days. A co-worker of mine on his second day of work traveled with me. We were in Birmingham, Alabama at the time. Traveled with me down to Columbus, Georgia for a meeting. This was his second day on the job. About 2.5 hours away from our office. He informed me as we're driving that his father-in-law was very, very, very sick. So we prepare for the seminar that night. We get up, we go to the seminar, and he got the word that morning that his father-in-law had not made it through the night and he needed to get back to Birmingham. I didn't know what I was doing, but I said, Dale, take the keys and go. Todd, how are you? I don't know. How are you going to get back? I don't know. Go. Dale emailed me last week on his 12th anniversary at the company, and he said, it's been 12 years since you gave me the keys. Wow. That meant a lot. Had no idea at the time, but that still sticks with him today. Peter was a client of mine last year, vice president at a very large insurance company in charge of about 400 sales agents. And Peter had a team of directors that were in charge of all these agents. Peter came to me on the side and he said, Todd, I need to tell you something. I need to ask something here. My directors, they're doing a great job with our sales numbers. They're doing a great job with our sales numbers, but I don't think they know our people. They're not meeting with our people. They're not asking questions about, workload and kind of what's going on and employee satisfaction and some of these things. I want you to teach them how to do that with their people. Okay. Peter, when's the last time you had a meeting with them to do that yourself? Talk about an elephant in the room. Peter wanted the instructor to come in and teach his people how to have those meetings. Peter, research says if you'll do it, it will communicate to them how important it is, and it will carry right on down the line. So guess what our takeaways are for challenge number 2? A couple of things. I'm going to give you a minute to write this down, and I've got a little index card thing we're going to do here, but let me talk about number 1 first. The challenge here is not underestimating how impactful you are on the people around you. Okay, here's what I mean when I say first 30 and last 30. This is important. This is a got to get. You want to write this down, okay? Talking about being impactful on the people around you. Force yourself to be extremely disciplined the first 30 minutes of the day and the last 30. That's not a ticket to be undisciplined to the rest of the day. That's not what I mean. But here's what I mean. I can tell you this. I am very, very guilty myself of coming in, and the first thing I do when I hit my office is I got to check up on those emails, got to read the news, got to do some things, and all of a sudden I'm integrated kind of into my own little cocoon, what I would call an office cocoon. Ask yourself, does that match what you say your priorities are? What I challenge myself to do in the morning for just the first 30 minutes is identify what is most important. If my people are most important, the last thing I need to be doing is sitting at my desk checking my emails. What I need to be doing is what my grandfather did, put on the hard hat and go get on the floor. And go walk around and go shake some hands. Hey, Bill, how you doing today? Hey, Judy, how's it going? How's everything going with, I know your daughter was sick. How's it going? First 30, last 30. Trust me, your day in between will be very, very different if you'll be very disciplined the first 30, very disciplined the last 30. That's a good takeaway for you, okay? Now, here's the other thing. I'm going to need some help from those of you kind of sitting on the front rows, if you would. On these front tables is a stack of index cards, okay? Everybody in the room needs an index card. So if you guys sitting at the front would help maybe kind of divide these cards up a little bit and kind of pass those out for your section, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Here's what I want you to do. And this, I stole this activity, thank you, from my favorite college professor who actually teaches at the University of Mobile in South Alabama there. She wrote an article. She's a published author. She's published several books and does several blogs on topics like this. She happens to be my mom, who is the daughter of my pop, my grandfather. It's very, very interesting how the influence has been passed down. She wrote an article called The Power of the 3x5 Index Card. You have 2 minutes, and on the index card, in those 2 minutes, I want you to write down 3 to 5 things, or it can be 2 to 3, don't worry, it's just the card says 3 to 5 things, that most completely describe you. Now let me give you some things to think about. They can be characteristics about yourself. It could be an event or a tragedy or a success that really defines you. Or it could be a trait about yourself. If you and I were going to go into a foxhole together for the next week and have to, be there and have each other's backs, what would you want me to know about you? 2 to 3 things. You got 2 minutes. Go. I believe I should never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. So let me share with you mine. And there's a reason we're doing this. Keep in mind the challenge we're talking about. Never underestimate the impact you have on the people around you. Here's mine. Knowing what I know about you now and the shared values we have, I probably would rewrite number one. Normally I say I'm a man of faith. I think in this place I can tell you that I love Jesus. That's number one. Number two, I deeply love my wife and my kids, and my time with them is extremely important to me. So if we're in a foxhole together, if I'm going somewhere with you where I need to know you got my back and I got your back, you need to know that I love Jesus and I love my wife and kids. And the other thing you already know about me is that my three heroes are my two grandfathers and my father. And I lost my mom's dad in October of last year. If we were in a foxhole together, I would want you to know that about me. Is there anyone that would be willing to share their card with us today? Awesome. Try to hold this over here. Gotcha.
All right, my first one was similar. I'm a lover of Jesus. I'm analytical, and I'm an entertainer.
Interesting. Maybe at the break time we could see. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? All right, in the back.
I have 6, love for God. Number 2, family, including my spouse. Number 3, serving others, loving to teach, faithful in keeping commitments, and passionate about whatever I do.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, let me ask you this question. This is the elephant in the room question. Have you asked your staff to do one of these? Now, in this particular audience, I'm guessing the answer is probably yes. You guys are phenomenal, by the way. That's rare. With the audiences and the groups typically that I present, but even today, I think you still need to challenge yourself. That's really the point. The closing point of the article was not really about yourself, but are you giving your folks a chance to share that with you? My mom certainly protects the confidentiality of her students, but she just mentioned, she said, you just cannot believe the things that people are willing to share that they've been through. Well, guess what? That puts her in a little bit of a different mind frame 3 weeks later when maybe someone misses a deadline and she knows it's because their child was going in for cancer treatments. Does that mean that she's okay with missing deadlines? No, it doesn't mean there's no rules. It's not what it means. It means to the level of understanding and impact on those around you. Don't minimize the takeaways. The black and yellow boxes there are specific takeaways for you to consider, okay? And these are about challenge number 2. Never underestimate the impact you have on people. Now, number 3 is kind of interesting. Let me tell you about number 3. This is probably the most elementary of the 4, but possibly the most impactful. And it's what I call choices and consequences, the concept of choices and consequences. And let me give you a couple of examples. The first one I call the Walmart effect. Have any of you had the privilege of being in a Walmart in Alabama on a Friday night? It is interesting. Let me tell you what you hear. Put down the Twinkies and get back in the buggy. I told you, Junior, get back in the buggy. Get your butt back in that buggy. Quit screaming, quit yelling. And over time, the volume gets louder and the people get madder. And it becomes this screaming match. There's a lot of trash on TV that spotlights this kind of behavior. It's what I call the Walmart effect, this screaming and the telling of what these behaviors are going to be. This really gives us a picture of what choices and consequences are, okay? Why are we taking on the problems of other people? If we had taken an hour to continue this list, my guess is some of you have trivial management issues like people being late for work, people not showing up for work, maybe arguments between coworkers. I'm talking about kind of those trivial things where you're saying, I cannot believe I'm having to deal with this. Guess what? Stop dealing with it. I'm going to, for time purposes, go to the next slide and give you the takeaway. Stop taking on the burden of other people's problems. Focus your efforts on explaining the options. Guess what I tell my people every single day? I don't care if you're late for work. I don't care if you meet our dress code or whatever other guidelines are listed in the handbook, the employee. I don't care. The next time you do, you won't be employed here anymore. Now, for some reason, we don't handle it that way as managers. We get mad and we take on the burden of their actions and their behaviors, and we get mad and our own blood pressure elevates and our own volume, and we say, you have got to be at work on time. This is the 5th time I've told you, you have got to be here on time. Or, that's not how we talk to customers. We've got to talk to customers this way or that way, or whatever the case may be. Fill in the blank with those trivial management-related issues. Stop. Release yourself of that burden. Sit back and take a deep breath and say, Bill, I got to tell you, you were late this morning for the 4th time. Let me just make it real simple. If you choose to show up at work on time from here on out, you'll have a great career with us. And Bill, I really love you as a friend and I appreciate you. And Bill might even be a family member. But Bill, the next time you choose to show up to work late will be your last day of work. Now, your questions are, Todd, are you telling me to fire a family member? I don't have the authority to do that. I don't know how that works in your business. What I'm saying is, stop taking on the burdens of other people. Your role as a manager is to say option A, which has this consequence, and option B has this consequence. You're a grown adult. You choose. This is the most elementary of the 4, and I'm telling you, it could be the most radical. It could be the thing you take out of here that changes things the most if you will stop taking on the burden of other people. The Carlos story, real quick, I'll tell you. This was in California. A big guy, Carlos, comes. I'm basically telling the same thing. He says, Todd, you're not going to believe this. He said, my son, Carlito, we go to the ballpark every night. He's a baseball player. We go to the ballpark every night. And it's cool in California in the evening, so we asked Carlito to wear a jacket. Carlito doesn't like wearing a jacket. We argue and fight every night. I said, Carlos, go home tonight and give him 2 choices. Carlito, if you'd like, as soon as you put on the jacket, we'll leave for the ballpark. And it's okay. It's perfectly fine, Carlito. If you don't put on the jacket, we'll just stay at home. The next morning, Carlos, who's about 6'6", comes in and bear hugs me in front of the audience. I'm thinking, this is weird. He says, Todd, you've changed my life. What are you talking about? He said, I gave Carlito 2 options. We were about 2.5 minutes later, we were in the car. He's got his jacket on. He was capable of making the decision when he understood the consequences. Now, as a manager, you also have the obligation of carrying out the consequence when they make the bad decision. If you don't have the guts to do that, the problem snowballs. Stop taking on the burden of other people. Pull back, lower your voice, lower your blood pressure, give the 2 options, and let them choose. Fill in the blank with whatever trivial management issue it may be. More times than not, folks that I've had to fire or terminate their employment, they knew it was coming. They fired themselves. Okay? But it's equal to how much you let them manage their own decisions instead of taking on those burdens. That's what it means. Concept of choices and consequences. Very elementary concept, but huge huge impact in the real world. Okay? And then here's number 4, and we'll be done. And this really goes back to the first session from this morning about looking at yourself first. Take a self-inventory by asking a few tough questions. If you're going to manage those around you, if you're going to turn people's talents into performance, like Marcus said, you've got to have some things in line first. Here's a list of questions I want you to consider. Number 1, what are you inputting? If I asked you right now, what book are you reading right now? Is there an answer? Or if you're a visual learner, there's videos. The Marcus Buckingham clip, I tend to sort of connect to seeing him speaking, maybe even more so than I do reading. My pastor once told me, his output is only as good as his input. When that input dries up, his output's not very good. If you want to have output or influence on the people around you, you have got to ask, what are you inputting? Okay? Maybe that's one of those elephant in the room questions. The next inventory question. How often do you serve others? This is another question that probably out of all the audiences I speak to, you guys would be at the top of the list. You guys probably do this very well. But look at the detail underneath. I mean, how often do you serve others? I'm talking about no agenda, no control, no expectation for anything in return. For business leaders and for those A-type personalities, or what DISC labels as a D, a high D, the get it done people, this is where the I don't have time for excuse comes in. Challenge yourself to answer, when's the last time I have served somebody else with nothing in return? At the end of the day, did somebody have a reason to tell me thank you for something? What are your top 3 priorities in life? And would you pass the Andy test? Now, I'll tell you what the Andy test is here in a minute. But if I asked you to list the 3 things you believe, not only about your core, back to the navigate theme, or back to the compass theme of the seminar, but even specifically about management. You guys have shared a lot of values with me over this morning and last night. Think about what would be on that list. Now here's a question for you. This is the Andy Stanley test. I referenced Andy last night. Here's what Andy says. Andy says, I can tell real fast how disciplined you are about those values. You know how? All I need are 2 things. I need your calendar and I need your checkbook. Show me where you spend your time, show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you if you pass the Andy test or not, okay? Well, look at the bottom where it says at work. All managers say they care about people. Remember that last night? Oh, a long, long list of things about managing people, but then yet we don't have time. If our time doesn't match, we really have to ask that question. Do we really, really, really believe that? And if we did, would we maybe see the outcomes even more in our life? That's what the Andy test is, okay? One more. We talked about this one already. Ken Blanchard, if you want to know what kind of manager you are, ask your people. And this is a great starting point back to the survey for Marcus Buckingham. Okay. I've got one closing slide I'm going to get to in just about 30 seconds, but here's my question for you. I want to kind of piece this all together. We talked last night about 4 management myths. We've talked this morning about challenges that kind of fill in those gaps. The question you're faced with is, what are you taking out of here? Maybe it's that survey of the impact that a manager has before a class and after a class. Maybe it's the choices and consequences. But remember, we're all in a training class right now, and attending this class means nothing until you determine what's going out of here with you. Okay? So in closing, this kind of is the wrap-up of everything. I'm going to ask for my helpers to help me out again. In addition to the index cards, we also have a stack of spoons on the front tables. Would you guys help me? Everybody in the room needs a spoon. Now, I have 75 spoons, which is about how many people we have in here. So if we run short, if you're here with someone, maybe share a spoon with that person. I think we have enough. I'll take these back. I think we have enough, but if we run short, you guys share with a neighbor. Are we good? Are we close? All right, here's what we're going to do. Can I borrow yours? All right, here's what we're going to do. If I had to take my 45 minutes from last night and my hour from this morning and wrap it into one closing message, here it is. And remember, all right, I'm glad we had enough. I didn't know if we would or not. What I said last night in the kind of the beginning of last night's talk was this. My job's not to tell you what to learn. My job's not to tell you what to do with any of this. There's 60 different takeaways you could all have from this. It is up to you to decide what matters most to you. And what I hope is that this spoon is a visual aid to bringing all of this together. Okay? Here's what I'd like you to do. On the inside of the spoon, I'd like you to hold that up. And it's not a great reflection, but I want you to kind of focus on that. And you may have to kind of lean the spoon a little bit or maybe find some lighting. And what you should see on the inside of the spoon is a reflection of yourself upside down. Which is how I think the world works when we focus inside on ourselves. Guess what happens when you turn the spoon around? So instead of this way, focus this way. Look at the back of the spoon. And with the spoon facing outward, what happens? All of a sudden the world is right side up, right? Let that be a closing message. No matter what the little nuggets from last night or this morning, we're talking about the participative sport of managing the people and the performance around us. And a common thread through all of that is how right side up it is when we're outwardly focused. It has been a true privilege and honor to be here last night and this morning with a group that not only shares the same values, but that wants to dig and wants to learn. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity of connecting with audiences that do that. Leland, I really appreciate your invitation. I hope there's a few things you guys can take with you, and I wish you a great rest of the day and tomorrow. And I really, really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you very much.